Hi there, I'm Judith from Just Jude Designs and welcome to my free tutorial on how to make this cute little applique drawstring bag. Now this is a really great project for using up some of your scraps. There's lovely linen here, but if you don't have any scraps of your own, don't worry, we have some kits already made up, and all the kits contain Tilda fabrics both on the inside and on the outside, and this gorgeous Essex yarn dyed linen in the colour flax, and even the ribbon and the little applique template all ready for you, just ready to go. So I hope you enjoy this free tutorial. The first part of our bag we're going to make is the base of the exterior, and you need 10 little strips like this, and they're 1.5 inches wide by 5 inches tall. And you can go scrappy like me, or you could go with a colour scheme, maybe pinks or pinks and yellows, whatever works for you. This is a great scrappy project. So you need 10 for one side and you need another 10 for the other side, and you want to sew them together like this with a 1/4 inch seam, and then you want to press your seams open at the back, and this will end up 10.5 inches wide, and then that's ready for us putting our top section on. When you've got your 2 base panels made like these, you want to sew them onto the bottom of a piece of fabric. This is Essex yarn dyed linen in flax, which I think is lovely texture and also goes nicely with these Tilda scraps. And your piece here is 10.5 by 8, and it'll fit nicely the length of your base panels here. I've pressed the seam up towards the linen, and the next thing to do is to get both of these onto a piece of heavy sew-in violin, and this will give a lovely bit of body to your bag without adding bulk. So this is available in my online shop. It's a stabilizer, and this is a sew-in one, and it's soft to the touch, so it's really easy to sew with. And I'm going to spray baste these onto my exterior panels. To spray baste your pieces of violin, you want to put an old piece of wallpaper or an old shower curtain or an old sheet or something down on your floor or on your table, and we're going to spray the violin, not the fabric. So with the 505 you keep a little bit of height. You want about a foot, your arm to be a foot away from the violin, and you want a nice fine even spray. Now these pieces are both a little bit bigger than the exterior panels that we're going to put onto them, so you want to try and centre these, smoothing out all the air in between the layers like that, and you'll have a little bit of violin all the way around the other edge. Same for this piece. And smooth from the bottom and the middle out to the sides, and that way you don't get any bubbles. And if you wish, you can take that to the iron and give it an iron just for an extra little bit of settling down. Now we're ready to quilt. Now we're going to mark up our exterior panels ready for quilting, and I like to do a 1 inch diagonal grid across these. So what you'll need is a long ruler with a 45-degree line on it here, and I'm going to line that up against the edge of my fabric, not the violin. And I like to start at a corner and draw my first line. And I'm using this chalk pen, which has loose chalk in the barrel here, which means you can refill it. These are available in my shop as well as the refills, and there's a little serrated wheel on the end of it here, and you get a lovely fine line of chalk which just brushes off really easily and doesn't leave any mark in your fabric. I don't recommend using coloured chalk because it has dye in it and it could stain the right side of fabric. There are other marking tools available, and there's a whole article on these on my website. So I'm going to mark the first line like so, and it's just enough for me to be able to see to sew that on the machine. What I could do is continue marking up 1 inch lines, so the 1 inch in line on the ruler would go onto that chalk line, and I'd mark the next one and then the next one and so on. Or I could use my quilting bar, which just looks a little bit like a bent piece of metal or an Allen key. This is a really useful tool if you have one with your machine. This one that I have is 2.5 inches wide. And what it means is, I'll show you in a minute how to attach to the machine, but if I just sew one line and mark one line only and then use this bar to track that, my needle will be positioned 1 inch away from the bar, and I will be sewing here exactly 1 inch from this, and then I can just keep using my bar for every single line, which means I don't have to chalk them all on. So I'll show you how to attach the bar to your machine. To attach the quilting bar to a faff, there is a little hole at the back there and a little screw above it, so we just need to loosen the screw. I'm going to first put the bar onto the left hand side of the machine and open up that hole enough just to slide the bar in like so, and then you would measure, get a little ruler and measure 1 inch from the needle to the side of the bar here, and then you can tighten your screw, and that is the quilting bar attached to your presser foot. And you can also move it up and down as you maneuver your fabric in and out of the machine. Now sometimes we will need the bar on the left hand side and sometimes we will need it on the right. So to switch it over to the right hand side, just open up that screw, flip it round like that and reinsert it into the hole, and again remeasure 1 inch, tighten the screw, and that's it fixed on, and again we can move it up and down, and this time it's the little elbow that we track along the stitches rather than the tip of the bar. Now if you don't have a faff with this hole at the back, but you do have a walking foot, sometimes these little bars actually come with the walking foot. You want to attach your walking foot, and in the back of the walking foot there should be a little slot, and you can slot the quilting bar into it. So we're going to get started on our quilting of the panel. You might just be able to see here where I put that first chalk line, I have stitched already on that line, like so. And you probably want to increase your stitch length a little bit to maybe a 3 here, size 90 needle, 80 or 90 will do fine for this. But now we're going to carry on the quilting using the quilting bar. I have mine attached onto the left hand side here so that I can do the right hand part of my exterior, and then we'll flip it round to the right hand side so that I can do the left hand side of the exterior, and I'll show you what that looks like now. So the bar actually goes onto the stitch line, the first stitch line that you've marked on, and our needle is going to be stitching 1 inch over to the right of it. So don't keep your eye on the needle, keep your eye on the bar. There we are, that's our first little parallel line of stitching done there. You can see that. It's exactly parallel to the first line. So we continue using the quilting bar to quilt our 1 inch lines all the way over to the top right hand corner here, and then we'll switch the bar around to do the other side. So that's that side done, all the way up to the top right hand corner. Now what you aren't going to do is turn this round and start quilting, keeping your bar on the left hand side, and start quilting this side, because that changes the direction of the quilting lines. And what can sometimes happen is your fabric can twist a little bit in between your quilting lines. You want all the lines to be running in the same direction from the same top edges all the way down. So that's why to do this half of the panel we need to switch our bar over to the other side. There we go, there's all our quilting lines done in this direction, the whole way across the panel. So now we need to set up our panel ready for the quilting lines to go the opposite direction. So we want to mark our panel for a line going this way, our reference plumb line, so that we can continue quilting using the bar. So we need to turn our panel this way. And again, we're going to use the 45-degree line on the ruler. And we start off by putting it on the edge of the fabric here, not the edge of the violin, the edge of the fabric. But there's also a second reference point that you have to try and look at. So our existing lines that are running now this way, you want those to be lining up with the ruler, as well as getting your 45-degree line running at a right angle to those. So you're looking at that reference there, and you're also looking at these quilting lines running through with the lines of the ruler, and that's how I know that this is going to be at 45-degree angle to right angles to the first set of lines. So again, we're only marking one line on. I'm going to sew that line, then I can use the quilting bar to sew one side and then the other side as before. When you have both of your panels fully quilted, we need to trim off the excess violin here and square them up and make sure that they're both exactly the same size. So to do that, I'm going to use this seam line here as a bit of a plumb line, and I'm going to line it up with a line on my mat, and then we'll trim off one side first up to the narrowest part of the fabric, making sure that the ruler is straight. And I'm going to turn that round. So again, I'm going to put the seam here back onto a line on the mat, and then I've also got this lovely straight edge here to line up on the mat. So that's going to make sure that what I trim on this side is going to be parallel to this one. So I can get where are we, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.5 inches exactly. I've got my ruler on the half-inch line of the ruler here on a line on the mat, and that's nicely lined with the narrowest part of the fabric. Okay, so always trim your two opposite sides first before you do the opposite two. So again, I'm going to just use this seam, put it onto a line on the mat here, and use the straight edge that I've created in the previous cut. And the narrowest part is just slightly down here, so I'm going to trim that way, turn it round, and again use your mat, line it up again. We've got a nice right angle now here, so we can line that up on the mat and see what we can get. The narrowest part of my fabric is around here in the middle, the 1/4 inch there. So what am I getting? I'm getting 12 1/4. So it is common to lose a little bit on your length or your width with quilting. So I need to make sure that when I trim the other one, I'm getting exactly the same measurements so that the two are exactly the same. So I have trimmed both of my exterior panels. They're now both the same size. I've given them a good press. And what I've also done is I have written down the trimmed measurements of my panels. Mine came out at 10.5 by 12 1/4. So write your measurements down just in case they have changed from the quilting, because this is the size that you will need to cut your lining pieces. They may be a little bit smaller than the original sizes that were given at the start. So write them down, and then when it comes to cutting out your lining, you've got the right measurements that will fit your exterior panels. Now we're going to prep our heart ready for the needle turn applique. So your little heart template that you will have received, you can cut it out and just pin it on to your fabric, or I like to use freezer paper, which is available in my shop, which irons onto the fabric without leaving any sticky residue. So I traced my heart onto the freezer paper, ironed it onto the right side of my fabric, and then I have used a pencil to outline the heart. Now, pencil doesn't come off fabric unless you use Vanish soap, so do be aware that when we're turning the fabric over, you need to turn the pencil line completely underneath. If you're not confident in doing needle turn applique, then use a water soluble pen or a non-permanent fabric marker that can be easily removed. So now we can peel our freezer paper away, and you can reuse this. There's a waxy side here, and while it's still shiny, you can keep using it for a number of times. And you can see here now there's an outline of the heart in pencil. So we want to cut a 1/4 inch wider than this line, and that will be our seam allowance. And another cut that you need to make is into the little inverted V at the top of the heart here. We need to do a little snip there, just down to the pencil line and not beyond it, like so. Now we want to, if you look at the bottom of our heart here, it's almost like a right angle. So we want to either finger press or iron under the tip of our heart. This is where we're going to start to sew. So you can either iron that down, finger press it, and make sure that your pencil line isn't showing from the front side. Just put a wee pin in that to hold the tip. Now that we've got our finished tip, we can position that onto the front of our exterior panel. To position the heart ready for hand applique, you want to find the middle of your exterior panel and the vertical middle, and then measure up from this seam here 2 1/4 inches. And I have just done a little dot with my non-permanent fabric pen at the top of 2 1/4 inches there, and that's where our little tip of our heart will go. And then you're also making sure that this center crease is running up through the point and out of the V of the top of the heart there, and that's that ready for pinning. So that's the positioning of our heart ready for hand sewing. For needle turn applique, you want to use the smallest needle that you can manage. You can buy applique needles. They're very, very tiny and very small. If you can't manage that smaller needle, then my advice is to work with the smallest one that you can easily manage. And obviously the smaller your needle, the smaller your stitches will be, but you don't want this to be really hard work. You need a single length of thread with a good knot on the end. And we're going to start at the tip of our heart. So I'm going to turn it upside down here just to begin with. And we want to bring our needle up from the back and just grab the tip of the heart there, and oops, and no more. And your little knot will be buried in the back side there. Now we're going to be going down into the background fabric here, but when we put our needle down, we don't want it to go in level with the edge of the heart. We actually want to put it in at an angle like that. And then when we come back out again, you want to just grab the edge of the heart fabric and no more. And then you're putting the tip of the needle down at an angle but into the background fabric. And then back out just on the fold. And you keep going in that way. This is called an invisible applique stitch. And you can't really see stitches that much. You can see little indentations more than anything. And you keep working your way along the pencil line, making sure that the pencil line is tucked underneath. Now when it comes to the curves, quite often in needle turn tutorials you would see those curves snipped into little 1 centimetre snips. I don't like doing that because the finish for me isn't as smooth. I find I get little jaggedy points where the snips meet the fabric. So I do something called, well, I call it rolling, and neither am I using the needle to pull the fabric underneath. I just use my left hand, my finger and thumb of my left hand. So I'm just going to do a couple of stitches here along this straightish part of the heart. And then we start coming up to the pencil line where it's just starting to curve a tiny wee bit. So I'm just going to tuck the fabric under and come out down at an angle, back out just on the edge. And you want about 1/8 of an inch, I suppose, in between your stitches. So again, we want to turn that under there. I'll push my pen out of the way. So I'll roll another little bit of the curve and do a couple more little stitches. You don't want big gaps in between your stitches. Keep everything nice and small. And another little roll of the fabric, and we'll roll it another little bit. Now do be careful as you're coming around the tightest part of the curve that you don't get any pointy bits. Maybe just do another little curve there. You want your curves to be nice and smooth. And you can see there how we're turning the corner nice and evenly of our heart. So keep going all the way down to the little inverted E here, V here, and I'll show you what we need to do there. So we've come around the top corner here of our heart, and we've come down into the little inverted V here. And what you want to do is do a couple of stitches in the one place right in that little inverted V, and this is a little stab stitch, and it's just going to secure the very top of our heart where the fabric is very thin there, because we did that little snip, and that'll keep it nice and secure and nice and tidy. And then we're ready to start coming up the other side of the top of the heart there. And you just carry on as you have been doing previously, just grabbing the very edge of the fabric and putting the needle down in at an angle. When you get back to where you started, you want to finish on a little stab stitch. So it's another couple of stitches just in the same place right at the point. And I just do a couple of little shallow stitches in the back there to make it extra secure before snipping the thread. So that's your heart finish. You just need to give it a good press to settle all the fabric back down. Once you've got your hearts appliqued onto both of your exterior panels, we now want to make and attach the little drawstring channel that goes at the top of each of these panels. So the width of my panel came out at 10.5, and we're actually cutting these little strips 1.5 inches by 11.5, and that's because at each short end we're going to iron under 1/2 inch and then another 1/2 inch and do the same at the other end, and then you iron the whole strip in half lengthways with the wrong sides together, and that will be a little bit shorter. If you put that along the top edge, you can see that we've got about almost 1/2 inch free at each side, and that's what we want because our seam allowance is going to absorb most of that. So when you've got your channel ironed and in position, you pin it on to the right side of your exterior, and you're going to use a large tacking stitch to secure that along the top really close to the edge, much less than 1/4 inch, and you can see what I've done on this one here. And eventually this is going to be sitting up proud like that at the top of our bag. So get those tacked on just at this stage, machine tacked on, and repeat for the other side. When you've got your channels tacked on there, you want to assemble the exterior bag. So we're going to put both of these pieces right sides together, and the part that you really want to keep an eye on is our two little seams here. You want to make sure that those are lining up nicely whenever you pin. So if you pin that bit first and then do the same on the other side, then you can pin around the rest of it. Like so. So we're going to use 1/4 inch seam allowance. We want to start up here and we're going to come down across the bottom and all the way back up at the top and start and finish with a little reverse stitch. You will need probably a 90 needle in for this, and you'll need to increase your stitch length a little bit, maybe 3.5 to just get through these thicker layers. Before you turn your exterior bag right side out, clip the corners just at an angle there very carefully to remove the bulk. Don't cut into your stitches. Then you're ready to turn the bag right side out. And you could poke your corners out with scissors or a knitting needle, and that's it, ready for a good press. And once it's pressed, we can put it to one side, and then we're ready to move on to our lining. cut out your 2 lining pieces for the bag. Now remember, if the dimensions of your exterior bag have changed from the requirements list, then you'll have to make that adjustment also on the lining. Place the 2 pieces right sides together and pin them, and then you're going to sew around the 2 sides and the bottom edge, remembering to leave a gap in the middle of the bottom edge of about 3 or 4 inches here, and start and finish with a little reverse stitch there and there. Now it's time to join our lining to our exterior bag. So we're actually exterior bag is right side out, our lining is inside out. We're going to put the exterior bag into the lining. And you want to align the side seams and open up the side seams like that, so that the side seam of the lining is sitting on top of the side seam of the exterior. And we'll open both of those up like that and put a wee pin in the seam to hold that in place while we do the other side. Both of those open. And then you want to pin a couple of pins in the rest of it. It's all fitting together lovely. Getting the top edges there nicely lined up. Now what you're going to do is you're going to sew around this top edge with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and you want to start and finish with a reverse stitch. Keep your seam allowance quite scant here, and you probably want to take your accessory tray off your machine, which will help with fitting it in underneath and being able to sew around it this way. So to sew around this top edge, I want a scant 1/4 inch seam, and I've increased my stitch length to 3.5. Remove your pins and turn the bag right side out through the gap in the lining. Check all your seams around the top there to make sure that everything is caught in as well. Okay. Now you can either hand sew or machine stitch close the gap in the lining, and you can either do it now or you can do it at the end. I like to do it at the end, so I'm going to push the lining down into the bag and get this top edge nice and neat. You can see our little channel starting to pop up. You want to give this a good press around here so that the lining fabric is nice and flat, and it will look something like that. Then we're going to be sewing around this top edge again, so keep your accessories tray off, and it's just going to be your scant 1/4 inch seam all the way around, and that will stop the lining from creeping back up into the bag. Finish your bag, we need to thread our 2 drawstring ribbons through our channel. So you need 2 pieces that are 27 inches long. You don't want to go anything wider than 1 centimetre, because really our channel is only just bigger than 1 centimetre. So anything that's 1 centimetre or less. And you also need a safety pin that will fit inside the channel. So put your safety pin on one end of your ribbon, and we start to thread in from one side. and just give it a wee push in there to get started, and then push your safety pin along inside the channel. And you're coming out, you don't want to get stuck in the fold that we tucked under on this end, so you have to wiggle it about a bit to get it to come out in the gap. So pull your ribbon so that you've got a little bit left at the end that you went in at. Just be careful you don't pull it completely out. And then flip it over, and making sure we don't have a twist in our ribbon, you want to feed it in now to the other channel. And again out through the end, and we're back where we started. And you can take your safety pin off at this stage, and just to level them up, you just give that a little pull so that they're both the same length, and then you can just tie a little knot in them, or you could thread a bead onto the end of it, you could sew a little fabric tab onto the end, but I'm just going to knot them. So that's one side done. Now we want to thread the other piece of the ribbon in through the other side. So it's just a repeat of stage one. And that's our drawstring ribbon into the top of our bag, and when you pull both of the ribbons, it will close together like so. I hope you had fun with my tutorial. If you'd like lots more inspiration, free tutorials, patterns and classes, do check out my website. You can also follow me on Instagram and Facebook.